I try to share some of my thoughts about what teachers are expected to be and what today's classrooms are supposed to be. Before that, I think what Mr. Praveen has initiated and what Lily has done today is something that not many people have dared to do. Bringing teachers from various schools to participate in a teaching competition. I don't know whether it's fair for me to call it that way. I was, in fact, Mr. Praveen told me, I told him, see, I'm not very sure how successful this initiative would be because teachers, as we are, do not have the courage or confidence in most cases to go outside and do what we always do inside the classroom in front of a different audience. Because our understanding of what our children are meant to be doing in the classroom and our understanding of what other people would be looking at as different. So at the outset, I appreciate and congratulate all those teachers who participated in this event. I must also appreciate the heads of all these institutions. Because I'm sure given an opportunity or an option, many more teachers would have come forward, but I don't think the principals are that very comfortable and confident about sending their teachers out. And that to a competition. The first doubt they may have is that will they be poached? So we are actually, the schools, both principals and teachers are living in an environment of extreme sense of insecurity. And that's probably the biggest challenge. And I always believe that the biggest challenge that education is facing today is that we are trying to create tomorrow's citizens in today's classrooms using yesterday's approaches. There's a big disconnect. And that's what we teachers are facing a big challenge. And I happen to observe a few classes and we are talking a lot about 21st century skills and 21st century education. And we have also coined new terms like World 4.0. We believe that we are living in World 4.0 or 4.0. Also, we have also started talking about Education 4.0. And then from Education 4.0, we went to Pedagogy 4.0. Now we are also talking about Education Leadership 4.0. What kind of a world are we living in? And what kind of a world are we preparing our children to be living in? And what kind of a preparation for these children to live in that world are we giving in our classrooms? Now when we speak about Education 4.0, is invariably connected to the Industrial Revolution 4.0 that we're going on. We all know that the education system that started or that we have right now started during the industrial era. So about 150 years we have come through, and 150 years, a lot of things have changed in our world, except perhaps education. Our approach towards education, our approach towards the understanding of education still remain same as what it was 150 years ago. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we still continue to practice is that we associate education with teaching. Whereas education has nothing much to do with teaching, education has got everything to do with learning. It's not about teaching. So when we talk about teaching, when we call ourselves teachers, what are we supposed to be doing? Do we as teachers ensure learning in the classroom, or have we been just practicing teaching all these days, all these years? As somebody said, nothing is taught until it is learned. So when we say that we have taught, on what basis do we say that? What basis do we claim that we have taught? What's the evidence that we have got to say that we have taught something to somebody? And like Oscar Wilde said, nothing worth learning can be taught too. Nothing worth learning can be taught. And most of what we do in the name of teaching is only helping children to memorize. Does it in any way create an evidence for true learning in our classrooms? These are some of the questions that I keep asking myself most often. So there are two compelling reasons as to why we should talk about why we should be addressing teachers or why should we be talking about teaching. Most of us, of course, we look at teaching as an occupation rather than anything else. Though it is expected to be passion and a lot of excitement, a lot of commitment, kind of things like that. We still look at it as a profession. So there are two things. One, as teachers, we are expected to be increasingly irrelevant. We are supposed to be becoming irrelevant day by day in the process of teaching our children. Second, as teachers, we are called to do something beyond our capacity to do. So it involves a lot of stretching. Now, a while ago, I was talking about education 4.0. And the word 4.0, we are living in a world of disruptive technologies, or what we talk in today's world are things that we did not hear when we were in classrooms as students, or we still do not know even when we are teachers. We are talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about machine learning, we're talking about augmented reality, we're talking about Internet of Things, we're talking about 5G, we're talking about computational thinking, a lot of things which were not unheard of probably a couple of years back is what the world is driven by these days. And these children are supposed to be these children in our classrooms are supposed to be leading that kind of a movement and creating that kind of a world. And as Ken Robinson said, or in fact, I would rather quote Tom Peters, who said, education is beyond repair. What we should try to do these days is not to either reform or repair education. In fact, it's time that we transform education. And as teachers, and teacher educators, as some of you are here, I think we are expected to redefine education to suit the expectations of the classrooms today and the kind of the curiosity with which our children come to the classrooms too. I don't know how many of us as teachers can confidently say that we are teachers. As teachers, we are celebrated in our classrooms. I often say this. We are tolerated more than celebrated in our classrooms. And there is a transaction of the superior with the inferior that stops our children from reacting the way they wish to react. So what kind of thinking do we promote in our classrooms? As I said at the beginning itself, education is about learning. It's not about teaching. In fact, it's very sad that we still continue to use the word teaching rather than talking about facilitating. So we are supposed to be co-creators of knowledge in the classroom. Even our society, our country still continue to be the recipients of information rather than the creators of knowledge. We are still talking about information, and we transmit information. The entire transaction that happens inside the classroom is nothing but the transfer of information from the teacher to the student. We don't let that information to become knowledge, or we do not let that knowledge to become wisdom. And I think the entire cycle of education is about information and information to knowledge and knowledge to wisdom. That we do not let that things to happen, of course. There may be many reasons behind that. In 2008, UNESCO came up with a schools of tomorrow model. What should be the model of schools tomorrow? They came out with 4 major characteristics of the schools of tomorrow. And first one is about the classroom should ensure the highest level of achievement. The highest level of achievement. When we talk about achievement, it's not just about achievement in the academic sphere. It's not about the marks and the scores that we talk about. The highest level of achievement in its personal sphere, in its academic sphere, how much of that we cater to as teachers of the 21st century or teachers of the 21st century learners in the classroom. The first characteristic is that, the highest level of achievement. Secondly, speak about the highest level of well-being. And these days we talk a lot about happiness quotients of the schools. Schools are rated the world over in terms of the happiness quotients. How happy are the children in your classrooms? How excited? Because human beings are, please understand, human beings are by birth natural learners. Whether you send them to school or do not send them to school, they will definitely learn. As Ken Robinson said, they learn less because they happen to come to school. We kill creativity. The classroom schools kill creativity. There was a survey conducted among the street children of Bangalore. You should refer to it a couple of years back. Those children who have never ever been to schools or classrooms to understand what's the level of learning. And this survey came out with a very, very interesting finding that the children living in the slums of Bangalore can use as many as 7 languages. And we send our children to the test school, whether it's national or international, and try to teach English, Kannada and Hindi for 10 years or 12 years. At the end of these 12 years, they neither know English, nor Hindi, nor Kannada. And these children have never ever been to a school. Age of 7, 8, 9, 10, they can use as many as 7 languages. So that is where we again prove that schools only hinder their natural ability to learn. There are a lot of things. I mean, I'm not trying to discourage or demotivate the teachers here, but I'm just trying to throw some questions that should force you to think loud. We as teachers, I think we should sometimes push ourselves to a corner and create a very, very embarrassing situation for ourselves to understand what do we do. Do we think all that our children know today, they know it because of us? I think most of the things, and even for us as teachers, we know that if somebody said, teachers will stop learning if they stop teaching. Children can learn even if there is no teacher, but teachers cannot learn if there is no children. Most of us have learned what we know today only after becoming teachers. We learned for that purpose. It's not that we were intrinsically motivated to learn and we wanted to transmit this information or this knowledge to our children in which way. So I was talking about the highest level of well-being. When I speak about highest level of well-being, our classrooms or schools should ensure the physical as well as the emotional well-being of the children. So do we provide that? And third one is highly effective preparation for life. How do we prepare? We talk a lot about life skills these days. We talk about 21st century skills. A lot of things are talked about in terms of that. So highly effective preparation for life. We still believe, unfortunately, an education that only provides our children a source of livelihood rather than preparing them for a life, a happy, successful and productive life in the society. So that's the third thing. And the fourth one is a highly effective family and community engagement. How effectively do we engage ourselves with the larger community as teachers? We are not supposed to be isolated entities. We are expected to be a part of the larger society who are interested in the well-being and the acquisition of knowledge by the children. How much do we do that? Now, we spoke about this 21st century education model, and there are a few characteristics. What are the important features of this education in 21st century? There are 8 important features just for the information of the teachers and what kind of changes that you should bring in when it comes to redefining your teaching learning strategy. There are 8 characteristics. One, it says that it's an anytime, anywhere learning. Please do not be under the impression that classroom is the only place where children learn and that's the only place where children can learn. In fact, the least that children learn out of their learning happens in your classrooms. Most of the things that they learn happen in your absence and outside the classrooms. It's only that we still have that mindset that it all has to happen inside the classroom. So it's all about anytime, anywhere learning. And as teachers, our responsibility is to encourage our children to become lifelong learners. It's not just to give capsules. It's not about a one-size-fits-all solution to all the learning problems of the country. We are only supposed to be triggering that kind of a passion, that kind of a love, that kind of excitement, that kind of an interest in our children to continue the learning process. It's about anytime, anywhere learning. Secondly, learning has to be personalized. It is not to be standardized. So if you have 30 students, if you have 40 students, your success as a teacher would definitely depend upon your awareness about the abilities and inabilities of the children. How many of us make an effort to understand our children? So it's all about personalized learning in 21st century. Thirdly, as teachers, we are expected to only define the learning outcomes. And that is something that is still missing. Even today, some of the lesson plans that I went through, I found that there was no mention about the expected learning outcomes. So we still do not know why do we teach. And I think as teachers, this is one question that we need to ask ourselves every day. And I would even say before we enter into every class, why do I do what I do? And what's the ultimate objective of my going to the class, spending these 40 minutes with the children? What is the expected outcome from my presence in this classroom? So now we are now talking, even CBSE or NCERT has come out with outcome-based teaching and learning. So the most important aspect of the classroom transaction today is the definition of the learning outcome. So how many of us really make it a point to decide what is that I'm going to empower my children to learn from me in the next 40 minutes? What is that I'm trying to empower them to do in the next 40 minutes? So what we in 21st century as teachers, we are only expected to know what are the outcomes, and the rest of it is just leave to the children. There has to be a lot of flexibility in learning, because a lot of importance need to be given to differentiation in the classroom. So children learn at their own pace, in their own style, their own different methods. So a classroom should be a very, very flexible place where a teacher can definitely do multitasking. So that need to be created. The fourth quality is that a lot of importance is supposed to be given to project-based learning. This lecture method, this one-way, monotonous transactions, that communication should be stopped. Children should be given a lot of importance to the project-based learning. Real-life situations have to be exposed to the classroom and to the children. That's next one, that is the demand for the 21st century. A lot of hands-on learning has to happen. Then we also need to change the method of assessment. That is something where we have miserably failed as far as our system of education is concerned. We still assess them using the traditional methods of assessment that does not talk anything about the real skills and competencies of children. At best, it talks only about the child's ability to memorize information and reproduce when we ask them to do it. They came up with something, a wonderful approach called the continuous and comprehensive evaluation, and thanks to the teaching community who failed it. We failed the CCE. I mean, otherwise, this was something that would have definitely captured the real abilities of the children if it was administered by the teachers and the schools in the way it was expected to be implemented. So the assessments need to be changed, and teachers need to be better equipped to handle those kind of things. And lastly, we are expected to make our learners independent learners. Learning is expected to be a result of a sense of self-directed, self-motivated learning. But we do not allow them to become independent learners. We still wish to keep them dependent on us, and we live as we are the only source of information. In fact, the best of the teachers sitting here in this room cannot claim that you know more than 1% of what our children have access to. For the entire information that they need is on their fingertips. And we still claim a kind of omnipotence when it comes to the kind of information. I think there is a lot of misunderstanding that we teachers live with. And in fact, as teachers, in the 21st century's context, we are expected to be game changers. We are expected to be the trendsetters. We are expected to be the trailblazers. And unfortunately, most of us do not become anything more than glorified babysitters. So we use all big words to characterize the role of teachers. I think we, at the end of the day, we end up being a babysitter, a glorified babysitter. And that's what probably the schools also expect us. Many times teachers come and tell me, the principals do not allow them to do what they want the way they expect them to do. So in many cases, the quality of teaching and learning that happens in a school is restricted to the understanding of teaching and learning of the principal of the school. We also do not allow the teachers to use their creativity, their originality of thinking, and their ability to revolutionize the teaching learning process in the classroom. Although it is a big issue, I don't have any solution for this. But let's understand, while we talk a lot about passion for teaching and passion for learning, it's very important that we talk a lot more about affection than passion. And I think learning, even if a child, you want a child to love learning, we must make sure that the child loves you. I think a child's love towards learning is proportionate to a child's love towards the teacher. So when we talk about passion, or while talking about passion, let's also talk about affection towards the children. Let's also talk about compassion towards the children who are sitting in front of you, with whatever strengths and weaknesses they come to you. And let's also, while we talk a lot about content, for most of the teachers, from June to March, it's nothing but covering of the portions. These are some of the archaic terms that we still use. It's all about covering the portions. And a portion is not something to be covered, it's supposed to be uncovered, which we still do not know. We keep covering the portions. Portion is something to be discovered, something to be recovered, and something to be uncovered, which we do not. If this discovery of the portions, or the uncovering of the portions, or the recovery of the portions happen in your classroom, your children will become, or they will develop their ability to think critically, think creatively, think parallelly, think laterally, think logically. Thinking is not being promoted at all. In fact, the purpose of education in today's classroom is classrooms are supposed to be called think room. That's the new term that's being used. Classrooms are supposed to be think rooms, but unfortunately, most of our classrooms remain blink rooms. Children simply sit there and blink for 40 minutes. There's no thinking happening. We don't promote thinking that we are supposed to be. So while talking a lot about content, let's also try to focus a lot about the character. A lot about character too. The character formation is something that the education in our country especially has got dehumanized. There is no humane element of education. There is no humane element. So as education gets dehumanized, the society becomes demonized. So the demonization of society, the kind of newspaper articles that we read, the kind of tragedies that we witness, I think to a great extent, the culprits, number one, I would say the teachers and the classrooms. We don't bring in the human elements that we are expected to be promoting in our classrooms. And also another one more thing I would like you to discuss more often, because we keep talking a lot about learning disability. And now I think some of the teachers enter only to the classroom only to find out how many of them have learning disability. Any child who is not able to answer my question is a child with learning disability. That's how we define learning disability. When was the last time we talked about teaching disability? I think it's very important that we start talking about every child with a learning disability is also a product of a teacher with teaching disability. Right? Have you thought about that? I think it's very important. We need to talk more about, as teachers, I think we should start talking more about teaching disability than learning disability. I think so. And we also keep labeling our children. You know, the number of customers, when I was reading an article, the question was asked. These days, we find a lot of children with learning disability. And what's the reason? Because any classroom which has a management problem, we use the word classroom management. I'm totally against it. We are not supposed to be talking about classroom management. We are supposed to be talking about classroom leadership. We are not supposed to go to the class to manage the class. We are supposed to be leading the class. So it's all about classroom leadership. It's not about classroom management. But every classroom that gives us the problem of management that we still keep talking about. Let's understand the problem of management is always a result of lack of engagement. You are not able to engage them in our classroom, and lack of engagement always lead to problem with management. So there are a lot of things that we need to relook into ourselves in terms of our practice, our belief system as teachers who are expected to be transforming our classroom. This also use the word that we use, like, we call children as useless. The number of useless children also increase. Please understand, every child whom you call a useless child is a child who is useless, not a useless child. Please re-term that or represent that term. Those children are useless. If we can be a little more open-minded, if we can be a little more willing to change. Teachers of all the various groups of people whom you would have tried to teach, I think the group of people whom you find it extremely difficult to teach are the teachers. Every other human being or community on this earth can be taught. We teachers, we are not willing to accept change. We find it extremely difficult to accept change. I think we need to, Praveen, the time that you've given me to be all, I don't want to talk a lot more, but please understand, teaching a child is nothing but reaching that child. To teach a child, you should reach that child. Your ability to understand the child, your ability to empathize with the child, your ability to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the child will definitely make you an effective teacher. Let us start growing. Most of us have become what I usually call as bonsai teachers. When was the last time that you did something for the first time? Most of us have not learned anything after we completed our B.Ed. I think unless we ban this course B.Ed, which is nothing but a license to kill the creativity and imagination of children in the classroom, except in a few exceptional cases, we will not grow. So we continue to become standard human beings. We become bonsais in the classrooms. And when we are challenged by our children, by asking questions which we are not able to answer, we call them as child with learning disability. We must think and ask ourselves who has a disability and what's the nature of disability. And I was reading an article recently which says that a teacher should have three kinds of romances. I'll tell that and I'll probably stop that. There are three kinds of love affair that every teacher should have. It's very interesting. One is love for learning, and second is love for learner, and third is love to bring the first two loves together. If you are able to make that happen in your classrooms, you will definitely be ensuring learning. So we will talk more about learning and less about teaching. And as teachers, I think let our meetings and discussions and your time in the staff rooms be spent on talking more and more about learning and learner than about teaching and teacher. And thank you very much for the opportunity given. I said, so just a rank of I couldn't time. Thank you very much for your patient listening and the opportunity given. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll cut short the Q&A session. Mathew is going to be available in the panel discussion as well. And I think he ended with a very interesting, I would say an opening remark for the panel discussion where we are going to talk about teaching versus learning in the 21st century. So we'll quickly move to the space where we had lunch. Can we assemble there in 100 seconds?
20 seconds.
No, we are teachers.